No formality today. We're among friends. So please, if you want to come off mute, interrupt me, etc., put things in the chat pod, by all means do so. But what we're going to be looking at today is the way that the Turnitin integration assignment portal works. Kim, you can be the crash test dummy for 309 this morning, I think.
Only if you mark my assignments for me.
Yeah, good luck with that. All right. I will also open up my spreadsheet just to give people a bit of an update on where things are up to. So I think there's either 12 or 16. I'm losing track of which school I'm in at the moment, but most people by and large have several assessments using Turnitin for submission and marking. By and large, what we're looking for is green across the board to show that the assignment portal has been embedded, the due dates have been put in, and that the rubric for marking has also been put in, along with the grade center being configured. This is just to give you an idea of what I'm working off in the setup for each of the subjects in the pilot. Where I haven't, where you see red, for example, it's generally because I haven't put the rubric in yet. The portal's still there for the students to use. So they've all been done and available for students to submit, but the rubric itself I have to attach as I get them. So let's have a look at what that looks like in practice. In 309, I've got edit mode on. I am the instructor in this case. If we go and have a look at legal memo, first thing that's available, the student view for this area is slightly more condensed. If we have a look, not that one. They get their declaration, etc., and then they can go into submit. What we will have a look at though is what that assessment 2 folder Turnitin portal looks like when we go in. The question that I get quite often is the difference if the academic wants to change the submission dates or the release dates for the assignment. Those are two things that I'll deal with first up, because they happen in two separate spots. Once the assignment portal has been provisioned, you can't change the due date for the assignment inside the Turnitin portal. It happens here in I2 because it's already been provisioned. So if I was going to do that, I've got to change the task, which I would be doing using our normal drop-down, edit the task, and our due date is right there. So if you have to change the due date for an assignment for whatever reason, it's not a problem, you can do it, but you can't do it inside the Turnitin portal. It has to be done here at the front using that drop-down and that edit. And all that will do is shift that submission date. It flows through to the Turnitin assignment and it's updated. The other part is about feedback. And the scenario that I'm usually presented with in that case is I want the students to get their feedback back when I've done it, not after 3 weeks has been provided or something. So it's not a common one, but it does happen. And the way that that works is that we go into the Turnitin assignment itself, which will open our dashboard showing all of our submissions. You can see some stuff going in there. Ruth, I'll get to that. And Lisa's question about assist as well, because Haley asked exactly the same question yesterday. So we have been talking about assist. All right, so we have a submission in here already, which is great because it means we can have a look at what that looks like. In terms of that first question about changing the release dates for when students get their feedback, that is done here underneath the settings. And in this case, some of the areas are grayed out. We can't make changes to them in here, and others are not. So for example, the release date, at which point the grade for a task and all of your feedback all happen according to this feedback release date. That date has been set by what's in your subject outline, which is our whatever policy informed turnaround time period, whatever that is, 15 days or whatever it is, 15 work days. Okay, so that is how we can change when people get their feedback if it needs to be earlier. But by default, it's what it is in your subject outline. Right, questions about assist. So assist is about giving extensions, obviously, and when students are allowed to submit. In terms of submission inside the tool, students can submit after the due date. That's not a problem. They can continue to use the portal to submit. The problem is to do with the resubmissions is the one that we were talking about yesterday. Up until the due date for an assignment, a student can continue to upload and overwrite their existing submission. So it's student facing up until the due date. So they can submit multiple times. Let's say they got some horrendous originality score and they want to resubmit because they've made changes and adjustments, having looked at the Turnitin report. They can do that up until the due date. Once the due date has passed, any submission is counted as final. So that means you can only upload once past the due date. And that then tells us with that assist scenario, with students submitting past the due date, they can absolutely submit past the due date, but they can only submit once. So if the student was wanting to use Turnitin to check their scores, for example, and make adjustments, and they've gone past the due date, they're not going to be able to do it in here. They need to use, let's have a look at CSU student portal.
Lachlan, just on that, it's Lisa here. With submitting more than once the same assessment through Turnitin, we normally, or at least I normally counsel students to completely avoid doing that because of that problem with the originality score. Because the more times you submit the same assessment through Turnitin, the more likely it is you're going to get something like 80, 90% indexes, because it's going to throw up those problems. How do we get around that? Because if the student's going to, as you say, they're going to look at their first draft, they might put through a draft or a first crack at their assessment and then go, oh no, I'm not happy with it, and then put it through again, it is going to throw up these massive original similarity indexes.
Okay, so it doesn't work like that in the portals like this that we have integrated for the assessments. As long as they're submitting the same task in the same area or the subject site, it overwrites the original one and it doesn't count as against the match. It's the same file. It's just replacing the original. So the originality score is genuine rather than counting it as submitted. But if they were to check that assignment somewhere else outside of their assessment portal, then it is absolutely going to pick this up as something that's been submitted elsewhere. So that, I mean, it's an interesting scenario because the uni has set up the, we'll just look for Turnitin in the student portal because I want to show you Sam Parker's Turnitin solution is a good one to put students onto. The Check My Assignment guide, which you may be familiar with, this PDF, allows students to sign up to any of the schools. They have a generic Turnitin submission portal against the school that they can use, and any assignment that they submit in here is not saved to the global Turnitin repository. So it is a risk-free way of checking an assignment score that has nothing to do with the actual submission of the assessment. It's just entirely student-facing and not saved. So that assist scenario, and this is what I think Hayley and I were discussing yesterday, outside of this, was that students can be pointed towards using this facility, and in fact, it's in their subject outlines, to check assignment just to get an indication of scores without having to worry about it coming up in originality checks. It's in the scenario where we're using the assignment portals, however, when they're submitting here, it is being saved in the Turnitin global repository. So yeah, that's the difference between the two tool sets.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
No problem. All right. What I want to have a look at is what grading looks like in this instance. So we have Vanessa's in here, and I'm not actually going to put a grade in here, but we'll have a look at the tool set. When we go to click on grade, let's assume that we've gone past the due date for the assignment and we're ready to start our marking. We have our view here that shows us the similarity report, which could open by itself. But when we click on the grade button, what we get, and I'll make this full screen, is a condensed panel down the right-hand side where we have blue, red, and purple sections. The blue section is for our grading or our feedback. The red is for our originality report. So I'm going to click on this paper area so we can get a bit of a better look. I can scroll through the assignment here. And in fact, they've got a cover sheet, etc. in here. I can click in here as I think we had a look in our last workshop. You are able to put in comments directly in line with the paper by clicking on either a speech bubble, or if you've got quick marks, you can drop those in, or the inline text option, which basically will allow you to put in text like so, and then drag that text around wherever you want it to be. So if you needed to do that. So there are multiple ways to annotate the actual submission, and that will go back to the student as part of the grading process. When they open up their grade, it will also open up their assignment in the Turnitin Feedback Studio with all of that feedback attached or in line with the document. So you've got your annotated markups that you can do inside the document itself. You can also use a bank of quick marks if you've either created them or you're using the ones that are in there. I'm not sure that anyone's started using these just yet, but it is something that is worth talking about. For example, perhaps a school-wide generic set of quick marks for the School of Law, maybe, I don't know, but we could certainly look at creating one of those. But the area that most of you are going to be using, I'd say all of you are going to be using with your Turnitin assignments is this third one, which allows you to put in your summary text, which I guess traditionally would go at the end of the assignment. For the student, if you've done this somewhere else, you can copy and paste it in here. You can also provide hyperlinks, etc., if you need to. And then you can also record voice comments if you've got a headset as well for the end of the assignment. Again, this is a feature that some of you may use, but it is very quick and easy to add that type of feedback to the assignment. So this is arguably the area that I would suggest most people are going to be putting something in on the student assignment. I can see comments going crazy in the chat pod, etc. So I'll stop there for a second. Are any of those requiring my intervention, or is it more you guys chatting amongst yourselves with answers, etc.? Please tell me.
All right, I'm just answering Lisa's question about whether the sessional subject coordinators are responsible for managing all of this in their subject sites. And I said that they're being paid the 2 hours to get across the 2 hours worth of training. And any help that the conveners can give to the sessionals first time after they've digested that training will be useful.
Yeah,
Sure.
Of course, we'll assist with them with that.
But they are getting paid for that training, Lisa. So
what about the contracted markers? Are they getting paid for this as well? They'll need assistance because, for example, Miriam is not teaching Law 311, but she's marking the whole subject.
I'm happy to pay that for the markers as well, who need to understand how to do the marking at this level of detail.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So, I mean, the use case for this is going to vary. What level of feedback tools people are utilizing in terms of the feedback, I would suggest, particularly in the pilot. What I'm expecting to hear as well is probably that some people are still doing their marking outside of this, maybe in a Word document or whatever other marking guides they might be using, and then copying and pasting kind of summative feedback into this area, which will go back to the student. The most important thing really is that there's some commenting that is provided against the assignment, and also that the grade has been entered. The last part of the feedback is to do with the rubric. So when we have the rubrics attached to the assignments, and they will all be attached, you get a condensed view of the rubric, which might not be all that helpful to you as it stands. It doesn't tell you what those criterion are. Each one that's selected does appear underneath, but I think for most people, the easiest way to use this is to just use these crosshairs to open the rubric in a larger window. And here we have the student's rubric for the task, at which point you get to click on and highlight which parts of the rubric they have satisfied. That's how that works.
Lachlan, as far as you know, this functionality works equally on Macs as with other PCs?
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome.
Yep.
And if you stuff up that particular highlighting function, do you just click the undo? Where's the undo button?
Yeah, you just keep clicking on other areas and it'll
right,
it'll move it around. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. So
Right, thank you.
So this automatically saves, Lachlan? It doesn't, you don't have to save it?
It all auto saves. Yeah. The only part that doesn't auto save is the audio feedback. You've got to click on a save button when you do the audio recording. There's an inline save button there. Yeah. Now, in terms of providing commentary in the assessment at specific points of the assessment, that's the inline marking that we were looking at before. So if we're into the actual task itself and there are areas of that text that we need to make commenting on, so it might be here, for example, maybe you want to highlight a section and put in a comment, you just click anywhere inside the document to do that and it'll make that adjustment. The other part that people probably want to look at through this process is the originality score. Now, this particular student submission came up with 23%. And if we click on that 23 in the red section, we get our originality score view from Turnitin, where it's actually highlighting those matches with the summary over on the right-hand side. So in this case, number 20 is this one, and it was saying, well, this has come from some Victorian government website as well. There's a 1% similarity. As part of this process, I'm not in any way, I guess, getting on board how rigorously you use the Turnitin tool and the originality checks. That's a separate conversation altogether. But what I'm saying is the full tool set is here for you to scrutinize and use. And it's part of the student submission that you can view at the same time as you're doing your marking. You can download that if you're particularly keen on looking at the grammar score. That's what this E-rated tool is underneath. It's available. That again, that's intended as a student-facing tool, but it is available for you as well if you want to have a look at the grammar. But you can also download the whole submission, and that will get you a copy of it from here. Bottom left-hand side, you'll see the word count, etc., the pages.
Lachlan, can you, I think this might have been asked before, but can you highlight to check the word count minus, you know, the bibliography and everything at the end? It
doesn't do that inline, unfortunately. So yeah, it does limit the value of that, I'm afraid.
So if it downloads it, that's the Word document, is that right? Or is it a PDF?
You get a PDF.
Okay, so there's no way really to do that unless we converted it to Word.
I'll have to have a look at it, to be honest. I think you can get a word count through the PDF as well, but I'll have to have a look.
Okay, and what's the best way to download a copy of the marked paper? Is that just once it's done, it sits in another column?
Yeah, so I'll show you that if I'll close this and then I'll give you a look at it. The other part, of course, is putting in the grade. The way that the rubrics have been attached to all of these assignments is as a qualitative rubric, which means that we're selecting those various areas. I'll just open it again. So that means that all you get to do in terms of the rubrics is select which criterion they have satisfied, etc., to get the grade, but you're still manually typing in the grade up here above the assignment, the score. So that means that you've calculated that using whatever marking sheets or marking guides you're using, and that you're ready to put that in here. The other way to use the rubrics is when we use quantitative rubric, which means that there is a score associated with each criterion and weighting, for example, and that by clicking on those, it's determining a grade, and then it will populate the grade part automatically. But at this stage, I haven't had anyone that I've talked to yet about setting that up because it requires a bit more of a finessed understanding of how this works. That's all. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this. I also want to make sure that this, so you'll see there's that summary. The criterion that I've selected for her rubric is now appearing in that condensed form along the Likert scale. So I will reset this, Kim, so she's not impacted. Right, so let's say, for example, that our grade has gone through, and our student got, 20 or so, for example. This auto saves at this point once we click outside of this. And then once the feedback and release date is met, then the student would be able to get that grade and that feedback. It appears in My Grades for them. For the student view, they get the mark, which is hyperlinked. And when they click on it, it opens up this feedback studio with all the feedback and the marks and the rubric, etc., all available to them. So that's how it's provisioned to the student. They also are able to go back into the Turnitin portal itself and go back into their submission, at which point they'll also be able to see their grade and their feedback. So there's two ways to access it. One of them is through My Grades, the student view of the Grade Center, and the other one is by going back through the Turnitin portal where they submitted the assignment. Both point to the same place, ultimately. Any questions at that point?
I just had one in the chat about where we apply late penalties. And a second question about the feedback if we do have variable submissions. So say the feedback's ordinarily due 15 days after the due date, but someone's been given a 1-week extension. We haven't marked theirs yet. Like, will it just release once we've saved it in there after that date?
As soon as you've done it. As that date's passed, they'll get it as soon as it's done. Now, in terms of penalties and things of that nature, the Turnitin toolset won't apply those. So if they're going to have to be applied, then they'll need to be added to or retracted from the actual score that's put in.
So it's best to put a comment in that free text box, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great approach. Yep.
That's the way I've normally done it in the past, Hayley, so that you've got a record when you go back into it of original mark minus late penalty equals the final mark, and then you put the final mark up here at the top.
Okay.
So that you're not having to adjust otherwise. I suppose my next question is about getting the marks into or they're automatically dumped into the grade book. Is that right, Lachlan?
Absolutely. Yeah. They flow through to the grade center.
So I suppose you can annotate your grade center anyway, but that mark has to be the final mark with the late penalty for that reason, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, the thing is the relationship between the two is reflexive between Blackboard and Turnitin. So if you were to go in afterwards and change the grade center mark for whatever reason, that then would flow back into the Turnitin tool and update that as well. So you can't do one without the other. Yeah. So you either change it in here or you change it in the grade center later on for whatever reason, and then it will flow back into Turnitin and update the score. It works in both directions.
I had been a bit paranoidly in the habit of keeping a paper list of the final marks that I wanted the systems to have, just as a bit of a check, in case that reflexivity is not as reflexive as it could be.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's
sounds foolproof.
It sounds foolproof, yeah. Well, I mean, we can absolutely look at it. You know, we've given this girl 20 out of 25. She's not going to be informed of any of this because we haven't hit that release date. But for us, for example, if we go into the subject site now and have a look in our grade center, and have a look at assessment 2. Okay, so the submission is there. It's telling us that it needs grading. It's not going to actually flow through to here until that release date is hit, but any updates or changes to it will appear in here. Yep, it does. It's pretty flawless, but you need to meet that condition of the release date being met before it updates. Yep.
So in the event we had a concern with academic integrity, would the appropriate process be to just put our normal brief comment in the text box so that is returned to students on the release date? You know how we say your paper's been referred for investigation.
Wouldn't you have to TA the final grade at the top of the paper so that you don't actually put a grade into grade centre? Because you know how sometimes the penalty will be lose X percentage of marks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're not going to be able to put a grade into the actual Turnitin assignment itself.
Will it still be released without a grade?
It'll be released without a grade. If there's, I wonder if you can put in, sorry, that's a good point. Something that is not a number.
Is this where we can still use the administrative override column in grade centre to manually mark in those TAs? I mean, I know that we're trying to get away from that, and I hope so, but we'll still need to use a certain amount of manual override in grade centre.
Yeah, well, the thing is, if you change the column, the assessment column, whatever you put in there will flow back into here. It looks like it will only accept numbers, which to me means that you won't be able to put anything in there in the case of a TA. Yep.
Yeah, not the assessment column. Don't propose touching that. But there's an administrative override column in grade centre at the far end normally. Yeah, that column to still utilise that. To put in the
student's not going to be able to see it, so
no.
Sure. I mean, that's obviously
I think that's
where it goes
process.
It goes through to faculty for things like quasar and to, explain ourselves when we get the please explains.
I think that's where it has to go, because that's going to be the final grade that's transferred.
Where does the mark, if the mark is actually marked at first, where would that be stored? Just on their own paper? Do you know what I mean?
You'd have to keep it separate because you couldn't release it to the students in the Turnitin document that they get back, because it might change.
I think we'll have to give
Put it in the grade comments. Do you think?
I think we'll have to discuss that, because I know Vanessa marked a couple, and it's just sessionals that if they drop off that session, trying to work out whether it's been marked or not if they keep a separate file.
One option could be the grade comments, because the students don't see that either.
Yeah,
but
you could put it in there. Yep.
And I suppose conveners asking all markers to send them any. Oh, well.
It is a question about whether you want the full marked version with the rubric, highlights and everything else in Turnitin able to be sent back when appropriate to the student, and how that happens. Lachlan, I don't know whether you can do it in Turnitin and not return it.
No,
that's what you're saying.
no, unfortunately not. Basically, it's if you've marked it up inside the
it's ready to go back on
the integration. It's ready to go back to them. So your only option at that point is not to mark it up and literally just to put in a grade or no grade, and there'll be nothing attached to this apart from whatever you add to it. So
what have we suggested to markers, that they will have to download a PDF of the paper and mark with limited comments on a PDF and send it back to conveners while the investigation's initiated?
Why would you be worried about it? In the sense that your marking's your marking. The only thing that's going to change is the grade based on the disciplinary outcome from misconduct.
Because you're saying just that, yeah.
So just leave the grade out and the rest stays in there. Is that what you mean, Kim?
Well,
that's right. And just put your grade in your grade column in grade centre that's hidden from the students, so that you know what grade the marker would have awarded the paper, and then you can work it out once you get the disciplinary outcome from misconduct.
It might be a useful workaround, because then you're saying, Kim, aren't you, that you can leave the markup comments, and they're what they are.
That's right.
The student's not getting the mark up the top. The comment tells them that it's been referred to SAMS.
That's
and
right.
the grade comments in grade centre has the actual mark that was awarded initially, so that when it comes back and says it's got to get a 25% reduction rather than a remark, you can action that straight away.
It's very difficult in some sets of circumstances for the marker to mark the paper depending on the academic integrity issue. If the student's actually potentially plagiarised or entire blocks of answer, then it's going to dramatically affect what the original or the subsequent mark would be. That's the challenging aspect to it.
Yeah, and I suppose if that can't happen, Lisa, at the time, you just say that in your grade comments in the grade centre, so that people going back to that know what's happened, that there may be no markup comments, but you've actually annotated the grade centre to say what's happened and what state of marking it's in.
Okay, so
whether you've been able to complete the marking or whether you haven't, like a collusion case, for example, you'd probably be able to complete the marking, put a mark in the grade comments, not to the student, say it's been referred to SAMS, put mark up in the actual document, and that's an easier case than one where you've got a whole lot of stuff that matches to other sources.
Okay.
Isn't it?
So for absolute clarity, are we proposing to put a final markup in the top here, for example, for Vanessa's, where it says 20, out of 25, would we put a final mark up there, but put in the comments, hypothetically, this has been referred to SAMS because of academic integrity issues, or would we put no mark up there at all?
I'll put no mark up there and put any mark in the grade comments in the grade centre. Does everyone think that that's a useful approach?
Yeah, so if you grade the paper at 20, Lisa, but for the academic misconduct, you put 20 in your grade centre, but you put nothing in the top box there, and you just note it's been referred to SAMS and that the mark will be finalised once that's been investigated.
Okay,
Yeah,
so from the student's point of view, that when they get it back, they go, well, I've got nothing, but I've received comments in my paper that say, okay, it's going to be marked properly after the investigation's concluded.
Yeah, which is what they currently get, isn't it? They get a TA.
For the most
part. They actually get less, because at the moment
they get nothing back.
They get nothing back. So they'll actually get their paper back with full feedback,
yeah,
but no mark. So
yeah.
Just thinking creatively, you can put markup in the article, in the assessment item, and then you can download a copy of that and keep that on the S drive, perhaps, and then delete everything here so the students don't even get a marked up version.
Can you download with comments though? That's what I thought.
Yes, you can.
I support what Kim says in this one. I think it's great if the students can get the constructive feedback on their paper and see actually where the areas are problematic or where they did well, and then say, well, as a result, it's not possible to provide a numerical mark because of these, this investigation issue, unless of course, unless of course, SAMS gives us the option of not disclosing who's made the complaint. If there's a, potentially a bullying issue against the lecturer, that's the only, scenario in which I imagine we wouldn't want to necessarily just provide the paper back. But otherwise, I think it's a strong idea. You're still giving them, teaching and feedback, but still protecting the investigation process.
Do you want me to check just with Stacey Jenkins at the moment, because it's something that the faculty probably should have a view on going forward in terms of the SAMS process, but because we're in the pilot and other people are in the pilot, Lachlan, it might be just something to get Stacey and her equivalents to worry about for the.
I'd definitely get feedback
cases
about it, whether or not how they want to handle it. I know at the moment that there's some consideration, I won't say deliberation, consideration around how the academic integrity officers access the assignments and the student work, because previously with East, they had access to the entire repository. So they were fishing within the entire repository for student work. Whereas with this, they need to actually add themselves to the subject site to get into the Turnitin portal for the assessment, to get the assessment. So they can absolutely get it, no problem. But the process isn't the same as them just fishing within the entire e-submission pool and then dealing with Turnitin themselves separately.
Yeah, to the extent that we'll have a little bit of time to sort this all out, how about I send an email now to Stacey with those options that we've talked through, and we'll see what she feels about that. And
Can
then
I just ask, sorry.
That's it.
Sorry, there was a question.
It's just Christy, with SAMs, going back to them, there's a lot of cases that get to resubmit. Now, obviously Grade Centre will be closed. If Grade Centre is closed, is Turnitin still open or is it closed as well? How are we going to do those resubmissions?
It'll still be open.
Okay, I just, when you were saying they talk to each other, they do what they say. So
Yeah,
Grade Centre won't close.
No. So look, it's closed if you try and change it in the Grade Centre. But if you go into the Turnitin portal, it will still flow through and change the Grade Centre.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it bypasses. That's quite a, you know, a sort of clumsy CSU kind of mechanism in place that stops you changing it in the Grade Centre. But the relationship between the Turnitin portal and Blackboard is stronger, I suppose, than that. It just flows through and updates it. Yeah.
Just a follow-up question from that then, Lachlan, and if then logically then if, you know, resubmits then go through to Grade Centre and then update the Grade Centre, which has been subsequently locked, and this could go on for months, then those changes to Grade Centre would then go through and change the metrics on Quasar, wouldn't it? Change the statistics and reporting there.
Not if the grades have been transferred, Lisa, I don't think.
Yeah.
Would that be true?
When are the grades transferred?
Before grades are released to students. So
It's
if
like
someone's got a
6-week
TA,
window or something like that?
Because we do, you know, when we do the reflection, because we've just done the reflection reports, I go through and look at the statistics from, you know, 3-4 years ago to compare, you know, the metrics of how the subjects, the health of the subject on all sorts of, you know, in terms of, you know, student progression rates and that sort of thing. It affects all of those sorts of things. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying I'm just curious as to whether or not that it's going to, whether or not that it would be a small proportion of numbers, but, you know, at scale, it would affect it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we'll know until we kind of live through it and see whether or not it has that kind of flow on effect.
Yeah.
So I suppose the testing to do, Lachlan, would be to see if Turnitin talking to a closed grade centre and a transferred grade centre.
I might put Sam onto it.
I don't think it would change it because it's kind of locked for all input.
Once the grade centre is locked, the Turnitin relationship with the LMS will still function though. So if you change the grade or make additions in the Turnitin portal, then that will still flow through and force update the grade center. It will still happen. You just can't change it within the grade center window.
It'll change that locked. Yeah, right. Well, then Lisa's issues and worries are about talking to Quasar are alive, I think.
Yeah, well, we'll have to have a look at it and see. Just in terms of that question before, Hayley, in terms of the markup when you download it, you get at the end of the download from that current view, it provides you with a summary at the end, and the summary basically has each of the page numbers. So this is sort of your instructor view, and all of the commenting is available then under each of the page summaries at the end.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Lachlan, will conveners and coordinators and markers all have automatic access to the portal?
They sure do.
Okay, awesome. And do we get notifications in any way? Like say someone had a GP to submit in 3 months' time, would we know if they've submitted, or we would need to ask them to email us as well?
Yeah, you don't get notifications from submissions in the portal.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I mean,
you go and have a look.
There's a workaround which we can talk about, I guess, but it's to do with the grade center. So, for example, we have here that assignment, the submission that student made coming up as needs grades. Now, my notification settings, my personal ones, I don't have those on when a student submission is made. But if you had them turned on, you would get an email when something appears in needs grading, for example.
Okay.
So it is possible, but it's not coming from Turnitin as such. It's from Blackboard, from the LMS.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one other question,
Sure.
Maybe you can all remind me what the policy is, but in terms of the 15-day workaround, if someone submits early, like say significantly early, 2 weeks before, I think ordinarily the return date is 3 weeks from the due date still, isn't it? But if they've gone into a system, selected an earlier date, then it will still count from that earlier submission date.
No, it's always the fixed date for the release date is the release date, no matter when they submit it.
And we don't actually want to be marking papers early, Hayley, because the risk is the students using the portal as a similarity checking tool and they haven't submitted their final version. It's not like EAST where they just upload and they're done. They could be submitting multiple times, and in fact, they should be encouraged to.
Yeah.
So there's a risk for us.
I had a student in 314 last session who submitted like really early, one of her main tasks, but it was counting my return date. Like we missed it by a couple of days because I didn't even realize she'd submitted that early.
Yeah, that's EAST.
So
not this.
But I don't think it's synced with Quasar yet, so I don't think this session will have any feedback on Quasar, because, correct me if I'm wrong, Lachlan, I don't think this system's talking to Quasar yet. No, happy days.
All right.
Yeah, no.
That's easy then anyway. You know, we'll just say that you all got it in within 15 days.
Can we order the entries via the lodgement date? Good question. Let's have a look at the portal. What you can do on each of the tops of these columns for sorting, you can do it alphabetically by using the author. You can sort by title. You can also use the uploaded column. Clicking on that will sort them in terms of their submission dates from most recent to least recent. So absolutely, Lisa. Yeah.
And so the message to markers will be, do not start marking until at least that due date.
Until the due date.
You won't know if it's the final or not.
Absolutely. Yep. You can also, for example, and I don't know whether this will appeal or not, download all of the documents that the students have submitted. For example, if they were going to be marking outside of this, for example, and then just maybe copying and pasting comments or something, whatever. I mean, well, I've got people that have said to me quite clearly, they don't intend to use this platform to do their marking or their markup of the student work. They're using it to take care of the originality aspect, the originality check, and to put through the grade so that it flows through to the grade center. And that's all they're going to be using it for. And again, as part of the pilot, I'm not here to kind of, sort of judge and say you will use it in this way. But, that's how they basically would be doing that. If they're downloading copies of all of the student submissions and going about their process separately and just adding in what they want to in the portal, that's completely up to them.
We had that feedback from people at ANU originally, and I don't think they lasted in huge numbers over time. But there's no upload function to upload a marked document, is there?
No.
That the students retrieve, which is one reason why marking outside of it then becomes laborious, because you've got to try and transfer it. I don't know what you would do, but
yeah, I think probably you find that bare minimum is probably the answer we're getting towards here. Will be if they've got the Word documents and they've just written their comments on their own device or whatever in Word, and they're just copying and pasting it with the grade, because the marking guide or the marking sheet they're using is also outside of said system. I don't know, but you can't attach anything to this. So the only feedback the student is going to get is what's in this. So that's
cutting and pasting into the comments field,
Yeah.
putting the mark in and selecting the rubric cells.
Probably those old-fashioned people that print them out and read them in hard copy too.
They exist. They're still out there. Yeah. So, I mean, it's versatile enough to cater to those different scenarios, but the affordances of this process start to be, are reducing at that point. But no, we definitely get people that are talking about wanting to use this only for very specific purposes, like avoiding having to batch download and upload from EAST into Turnitin. And that's their only kind of concern at that point. So yeah, we'll find out. There's 60 something subjects now at the final point. There was 150 initially when the pilot started, and that's reduced down to 60 that are going through this process, by and large, because a lot of the outlines and work done for the subjects was done without, I guess, reading emails, or communicating with anyone else doing the process, but that's fine. Some people want to continue to use East the way that it was working before. But what we're looking to find out is we want the process to save people time, whether it's for your grading or the academic integrity aspect or the admin that's associated with any of these processes. And that's what we'll be following up on, and we'll start to see very quickly in the next couple of weeks as people use these tools for some of the low stakes tasks.
So
my experience is it's got to become a source of truth like East was, of what the marking was and what the reaction was. If I'm doing a review of marks, for example, I can go back to Turnitin and see everything that was the reaction of the marker, and that's really useful. And if all that information is not there, it's kind of more difficult for the students to get back something that's impoverished, and everyone looking back at it will get something that's impoverished as a record of the marking. Whereas if it can all be here. Sorry, I cut you off, maybe Kim.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
I was actually going to ask a question. What I'm thinking is, and what do other people think, we probably don't need a cover sheet any longer. It serves no utility anymore.
No.
Right.
It's another one of the affordances really that we're sort of hinting at, I guess, if the information has been captured in other ways, which it is through this submission method and through that placeholder text we put for the portals.
Possible advantage might be if we can't track the word count accurately.
Yeah, that might be the.
Well, leaving the cover sheet off assists with that in a way. We talked about the word count last time, didn't we? The declaration that's in the cover sheet for exams.
That covers simply submitting. It just says by submitting your answer response, you are agreeing to abide by academic integrity.
So is that text in the portal somewhere? Because if it is, their dean who has read that when they submit to the portal, would that be the way to go? You've got it there, yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's everything that was kind of the declaration, if you like, on the cover sheet.
It's just the accuracy of that number on the word count, I think, which is the kind of question at this point. And if there's a way, I'm going to have to play around with it a bit more and see how we get a true representation of the word count and what it's including, not including. There aren't a whole lot of options to customize the tool set as well with the integration. It's sort of what you get is what you get. So I'll have to have a better look at that as well. Well, look, we're just about at time, people. As I said, we're going to be working through this together over the course of the session, and you know, I'm sure we will get speed humps along the way with things working, not working, but so far it's been pretty painless, and yeah, I'm hoping to hear good things back on the process working, particularly for our marking teams, and not just kind of the conveners and others, but the marking teams being able to go in intuitively and go, yep, into the assignment and start marking. It's more of an issue, I guess, with the other schools involved, where they have, you know, several hundred students in some of the cohorts, and they have marking teams of 4 and 5 staff, and being able to split up the marking, because that can't really be easily accommodated in the dashboard in Turnitin, splitting them up. However, the workaround essentially is to use the grade center and to set up smart views, which allow us to split up the cohorts for marking that way, because as we saw with that student submission a minute ago, it appears under here, under needs grading. So you can actually go into the Turnitin assignment from here by clicking on grading from this side as well. So it works from the Turnitin portal. You can launch it and grade. From the grade center, you can also launch it and it will open Turnitin and grade. So you can do it from both directions, which is pretty neat from my perspective.
With multiple markers, you've just got to tell the markers which student numbers they're marking.
Yeah, well, you set up smart views in the grade center to separate them, so they can actually go into their smart view, which will just have their list of students that they need to grade. A lot of those cohorts are separated by different campuses as well. So that's how we end up separating the different smart views. Anyway.
And that integrates with Turnitin, is that what you're saying? So
yep, sure does. It'll show the submissions only for their students in the grade center, and then you go in to Turnitin that way rather than through the assignment portal. Does that make sense?
Are you talking about when there's multiple cohorts, so 3 cohorts?
Yeah, for example.
Yeah. What about within the one cohort though, if you're only doing law online?
You'd have to manually create
you manually,
and then the groups you can create a smart view in the grade center. But yeah, there's a bit of manual work involved in separating them. Yeah.
Does everyone know how to do that? Or is that worth?
No way. It needs some training for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We just go via.
Thanks, everyone.
Sorry, Hayley.
Just splitting via surname, I'm guessing, is probably the easiest manual option.
Absolutely. Maybe this will inform how that splitting is done. Yeah. So you get L to O or something, and then they work through that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Lachlan.
Reach out if you want to talk about any of this, but I'll make the recording available in a bit as well, and we'll go from there.
Great.
Thank you.